Hi, my name is Dr. Jina Ethelbah, and I'm joining you here today to talk about food as medicine. Uh, what we eat can strengthen our body, sharpen our mind, lift our mood or our emotions, and connect us to our creation. And I wanted to welcome everyone to the Virtual Harvest Festival of 2020. This is an old picture of another Harvest Festival a few years ago. We don't have one, or I don't have one live from today. So I just wanted to sort of root us together in Canyon Day at the farm. And thank you for joining us on this virtual presentation. It's new and we're all figuring out how to live more in a virtual society at the moment. And I'm really excited to share some information with you today about traditional Apache foods and how our food affects our bodies in a very positive way. So for Apache people, our well-being involves our entire environment. And in saying this, I'm talking about our traditional beliefs or our traditional systems. In talking about health, we include our mind, we include our body, our spirit, and our emotional selves in our discussions about health. And in today's world, there can be some confusion with this because as Apache people, we believe that if we have an imbalance in our body, it will impact our mind, it'll impact our spirit, it'll impact our mood, our emotional selves, and get those things out of balance because we sort of try to accommodate for the things that have malfunctioned or gone out of balance. And in today's modern world, we're really directed to look at medications, hospitals, clinics as a source of health for ourselves. And there's a disconnect between the two because one is really based on the natural harmony of things and really just a balanced life. And if there are offending things that happen or causative agents that come into play, it can affect our health on a large scale. Whereas when we think of medicine more in a commercialized world, we're having discussions of what kind of medications can fix my symptoms or make my symptoms go away. Is there a name for the illness that I have or a diagnosis? And it's not really about cause. Whereas in Apache culture, when we get sick, we're really invested in looking for what it is that caused us to be sick so we can try to correct those things. And foods have a huge impact on that. As Apaches, we're really engaged and rooted in our environment. Historically, we were nomadic people. We traveled, we migrated, we understood when to migrate and how to migrate from different parts of our land. So my family comes from Forestdale, but part of our migration was we would live in the Sedona, Cottonwood area at certain times of the year. Other times of the year, we would move down to Payson, particularly in the fall, and we would be collecting foods that were in the Payson area. Many people know Payson to be a good place to get acorns, but there's a lot of other things that grow there as well. And then the rest of the year, we would live in Forestdale and sort of the Show Low area. We had a lot of fields that we did tend to, but most of our living was off of wild food. And that's the same for other families and other clans. We were all living in different locations to follow our foods and meet our environment in the places where it was ready for us. Our ecosystem told us what to do, and our ecosystem is our environment. So how plants and animals function with one another and keep everything in balance with nature. And as Apaches, we were really respectful of that, and we were really aware of the balance within our land and how things were working out there. If animals were plentiful or if they were struggling. Um, we even named our clans based off of foods that we were known for, like Iya clan. They're known for their mesquite, and where they lived tended to be a lot of mesquite trees. Even our stories, when we share stories about our history, or we're trying to teach one another things in our family, traditionally, we would do that around food. So we have the belief that when you're trying to share really important information with people as a meeting, or you're educating them about something that needs to be kept in their mind, they need to be good at remembering it, we give them food with that information, because we believe that if they are swallowing the food, their nourishment, at the same time that they're getting the information and the education, that it will stick to them. They'll remember it better if they're consuming it. So it's not just the consumption of food, but along with that is the consumption of knowledge, and being able to let that guide our bodies, guide our decisions, our behaviors, let that fuel us emotionally, mentally, academically, and physically. So we talk a lot about food being fuel for us, but food serves a much bigger role in our society as Apache people. We have a lot of valuable, important things based on our foods. Even our wintertime stories, if we're telling a story about our history, about something that happened, and teaching our family our own historical knowledge, and also teaching lessons about things that we learned from history, at the end of it, we we express where our food came from as the ending of the story. So we say, like, I come from North Fork area, and our area where I'm from is Tsetse Ayu. So at the end of the story, we say Tsetse Ayu Hushkan Dashja. So when you think about what that means, the way that I was taught is, you're saying in that statement, the information I just shared with you comes from the land where my wild banana grows, or where I get my nourishment from the land, and that land is located in this particular place. So it really honors a food that we have access to, that we utilize, that nourishes us and keeps us strong and healthy, but it also expresses, this is where my history is from, and I'm giving it to you as nourishment, really, is sort of what we're saying in that statement. As Apache people, we ate with the seasons. So we had different kind of foods that we had access to in the winter. We had different kind of foods in the spring, different foods in the summer, and different foods in the fall. We had access to a great variety of foods year round. And I think it's really important to express that this is something that we had a lot of, because when we're taught about our history in school and in history books, they teach us about ourselves during a time of war, as if that was all that ever existed for us. And that's not accurate. As Apache people, during times of war, we were on the run, and we were being killed and bad things happening. Well, yeah, many times we were starving during those times. But that's not our truth outside of that one point in time. Away from war, we had so many kinds of foods. We had many different types of lettuce. We had many types of berries, many types of grasses that we could actually get grains from, or rice type products from. Lots of different kinds of roots, lots of different kinds of bulbs. There was so much that we had access to. And it wasn't until after we had to go to war and our lands were restricted, our movements were restricted, that we started to experience starvation and famine. And then the United States government brought in things that actually had a really big impact on our land and our food systems, such as cattle, which came in and overgrazed a lot of areas where it inhibited the regrowth of our natural foods. A lot of our wild foods are still very plentiful around us in our surrounding land, and we just aren't aware of it necessarily if we haven't been taught about it. So we still do have access to this. We just need to have access to the knowledge on how to live in harmony once again with our surrounding environment. This is just a picture of different varieties of foods, and that they do affect us on a grand scale. Our foods will have an impact on our body. Our foods do have an impact on our mind, on our soul, or if you want to call it sort of the spiritual health. Soul and spirit can go together. And then also emotional health. We were made to harvest. As Apache people, both men and women did harvest the wild foods around us, and we did grow our own foods, like in cornfields and beans and squash and things that we did plant. So we were made to harvest, and we love harvesting in our history and in our families as well. So our food communicates with our bodies. What we eat gives us a huge exchange of information, and it tells us about our environment at all times. So when we eat certain foods, it's communicating with our bodies if we need to be getting ready for winter, if we need to be getting ready for hot, sunny seasons. Our foods communicate and tell our bodies how to adapt to what's going on around us. So Apache epigenetics sounds really complicated. Our genes are really amazing. And 80% of our health is coming from our food. So we have a huge control over what goes on with our genes, because our food does tell our genes what to do. And I think this is really, really important to talk about, is you can feed your Apache genes, and you can thrive as an Apache person when you feed your genes the right foods. We are often told that our genes are faulty, and I see this a lot in medicine as a doctor. Our people are constantly told that we have high rates of diabetes because we have a predisposition genetically. So there's something wrong with our bodies. And I argue with this. That is not accurate. There was a study done on a tribe that lives on both sides of the American border and the Mexican border. So they're the same people, but when the United States created a border, some of them got put on the United States side and some of them got put on the Mexico side. The people living on the side of the United States have some of the worst numbers of diabetes rates in the United States. But the people, they're direct same tribal members who live on the Mexican side do not have diabetes. It's less than 1% of them that actually has diabetes, and it's based on the foods that we eat and the lifestyle. The people in Mexico, the tribal members living in Mexico, did a lot of walking, were still very physically involved in their daily lives, but they also were still eating their traditional foods and cooking everything from scratch. Whereas on the United States side, the tribal members really didn't have as much access to good quality foods. And there's a lot of things that play into that. And to say that our genes are faulty, that we have a predisposed tendency to be diabetics, is not accurate. When we eat foods that do not help us to survive in a good way, then we start to malfunction and have illnesses creep in. But when we are feeding our genes, our Apache genetics, with our traditional foods, we thrive and we live up to our greatest potential. And as Apaches, we're designed to live best eating wild meat, greens, nuts, seeds, roots, fruits, beans, and the things that existed in our environment and still do exist in our environment. recently, up until recently, we still lived very much within the cycle of what our environment was producing. So we still ate the things growing in the winter during the winter, and we still ate the things growing in the summer mostly during the summer. And that relationship that we had to being in tune with our own environmental cycles helped our bodies to withstand things like viruses, colds, temperature changes, and different kinds of illnesses. And that's acute illnesses that happen really fast, and that's chronic illnesses. When we return to living within our environmental cycles and within our own food systems, our body understands how to work better with our environment, and we become more adaptable, and we also become better at defending ourselves against illness. And that includes colds and viruses and chronic diseases like diabetes. Our food is medicine to us. So our food as Apache people communicates with our bodies. The Boys and Girls Club does an activity where they teach people that sugar has an immediate impact on their body, not only a long-term impact, but when we're eating things that are made with concentrated amounts or man-made sugars, it will weaken our muscles. And this is the activity they would do. They would have the students lift the heaviest weight they could possibly lift, and it would either be as a bench press or as a dumbbell curl, testing their arm muscles. And they would do it without sugar, and they would do it with sugar under their tongue in their mouth. Well, when they would do it without sugar, they were a lot stronger. Their muscles were able to lift much heavier amounts of weight. When they gave them sugar, either under their tongue or even in some cases just touching their skin, their muscles became significantly weaker. So it was to teach the kids, sugar is really hard on our bodies, and it does a lot of things that are not good for us. So when we eat, the foods that we're consuming are telling our body what to do. And some of that is immediate, and some of it is slower, more drawn out. If we're getting ready for winter, we want foods that are going to help keep us warm. And if we're in summer, we want foods that are going to protect us from our summer environment. Foods actually will tell our body a lot of things, even the quality of soil, and that goes for foods, and that also goes for medicines. There was a study done at my medical school when I was still a student on a plant that grows in marshes, and they actually found this plant because it was in the journal that they found of a United States cavalry soldier, and it was during the time they were passing out smallpox blankets, and people were dying all over because of smallpox. This soldier had documented a woman from a tribe that was healing people using a plant she was gathering from the swamps, and it was helping. She was treating both soldiers and her own people for the smallpox virus. Well, all these years later, my medical school decided they wanted to do some research on that plant, and it's a carnivorous plant, so it eats bugs. It's one of those plants that's like a Venus flytrap. And they found that that plant actually has medicinal properties that are much more potent than anything we've ever found to treat the pox virus. And so actually the military got interested in it because of potential for biowarfare in the future and finding things that can actually help to treat people if that were to happen. Well, they started growing that plant in greenhouses, and they figured out that that plant does not have any medicinal components in it when they grew it in a greenhouse or in a laboratory. It was only medicinally active when it was harvested from swamps. So the plants choose their own environment where they can promote and grow at their greatest potential. But it's the same for us as people. And we have a communication when we're consuming certain plants, either as food or as medicine. But those plants richness of medicine and nutritional components is going to be based on what that plant's preference is for the season it should be collected and the locations that it should be collected. And as Apaches, we were really in tune with that. Eating with the seasons, so eating winter foods during winter and summer foods during summer, is a really powerful way to actively communicate with your own body, your own genes, so that you can adapt to what's happening in your life. And I'll give examples of this. The foods that we eat will tell us when we should be conserving energy and when we can be exerting energy. The foods also tell us when we should be growing if we're still at a growing phase of our life. And an example is fish. Fish, I used to work in a fish hatchery at different times, but fish will have a season of growth. So they'll grow the rest of the year. They just don't grow. They spend their time conserving their energy until the next season that comes around, when certain bugs and certain worms are more plentiful to them, and the temperature is telling them, their body signals that it's time to grow. Well, scientists now are starting to manipulate those fish. They call it genetically modified foods, and they're turning those genes on year round so that the fish will grow throughout the year so that they can sell the fish faster. They don't have to wait until the fish has grown for 3 or 4 years and then finally sell it. They can sell it within 1 year. And it's really unfortunate, because in doing that, we have found the fish oils in those fish are more inflammatory. So they're more omega-6s than there are omega-3s, which are more anti-inflammatory. And the quality of the meat isn't the same as the quality of fish that are growing within their natural cycles, that are still in harmony with what the environment is signaling them to do. And it's the same with our own bodies. There's certain foods that we eat at certain times of the year that'll help us get ready for the next season or the season that we live in. And before we had grocery stores, as Apache people, you hear our history within our own families, and even in documentaries and things like that, about Apache people having incredible strength. We were known for our running capabilities. We could run long distances in short periods of time, or run distances for long periods of time that would have been difficult, or were even difficult for horses, people on horses. Our endurance, our stamina was amazing. We were considered to be superhuman in our abilities when the United States military was at war with us. They really had a hard time keeping up with us. There's so many stories of us having men, women, children, babies, elderlies, traveling 70 to 100 miles a day and being able to sustain that for days on end, when just men in the military couldn't, that were on horseback. So our environment, our culture, our code of conduct with our land and the lifestyle that we lived, eating the foods that were given to us by our land, made that possible. Our food as Apache people made us live up to our fullest potential. And you can see, when we don't eat foods that are right for us today, we feel tired, we feel sluggish, we feel unmotivated, we feel lazy. And when we get those kinds of foods, there are chemicals in those foods that were created in laboratories that were designed to make us overeat. And we don't realize that those foods are sort of taking us down slowly over time, the more we eat them. But they also create an imbalance in our ability to use fuel. And that's when we'll start to have issues with too much sugar in our blood, or not being able to utilize sugar like we're supposed to, because we've become bombarded with it. But when we do eat the foods that really feed our genetics, that feed us as Apache people, we feel that our minds are clearer, our emotions are better, we feel more optimistic, we feel more involved, we think at our best. And if you think about it, we long for those foods more. So right now is the time for acorn stew. But how many times do you wish for acorn stew throughout the year? You look forward to it again because it nourishes you, it awakens you, it revitalizes you. When you're going to get to drink ngoja again, you look forward to it. It makes you feel good. Wild tea, when you get to drink that, it makes you feel blessed. And it makes you feel like you're doing something good, and you feel good after you've consumed it. You don't have that sluggish, tired, unmotivated, lazy feeling that comes over you. You feel sort of accomplished when you eat traditional foods, or foods that feed your genetics in a really good way. So the food that grows in each season is designed to protect us in that season. And so foods that are grown in the fall, and this is foods that are grown on our land, but also at the farm, not so much in grocery stores because we ship foods from all over the world, but the farm and our own Apache land will grow foods that tend to have antiviral properties in the fall. And a lot of those foods actually also have anti-parasitic properties, meaning if you had parasites in your intestines or worms in your intestines, there are certain foods that actually help to kill those off that we routinely ate every fall. So every Apache family historically would go through a parasite cleanse, and that would prepare us to be ready for winter, because you don't want to go into winter with parasites in your intestines because they'll steal from you. They rob nutrition from you, and it makes you harder for you to survive if an illness comes, or it just makes it harder for you to resist the cold. So our foods in the fall really help to get us ready for winter, but also helped us to transition through the temperature changes that happen in the fall. Wintertime foods, things that we would store in the winter and things that grow in the winter, tend to have higher levels of vitamins A, vitamins B, and vitamin C, and iron. And that's because we need higher levels of those nutrients to help us defend ourselves from viruses and from anemia and illnesses, bacterial infections, and so on. So the foods that we would eat in winter tended to have properties that help our metabolism to keep us warm. So it required less energy to process those foods. And we ate a lot of hot foods. You shouldn't be eating very many cold foods in the winter because it taxes your system. Eating warming foods, soups, broths, those kinds of things in the wintertime will replenish our minerals and improve our circulation. In the spring, a lot of the foods that grow at the farm and in our land tend to be dark greens and bitter plants. So those plants help us to get our liver cleaned up and moving. They help to rehydrate our skin because the wintertime is a very dry time of year. So a lot of the foods that are growing in the spring have a really high affinity towards helping out the liver and rehydrating our skin. And they have high starches and protein contents to them too, because we need to recover and start rebuilding muscle and fat that we may have lost during the winter. Summertime foods tend to have very vibrant colors, and a lot of sour foods will come out in the summer that help to encourage digestion and absorption of nutrients. And those foods also offer protection to our skin. We tend to depend on sunscreens to protect our skin, but there actually is a systemic protection that the vibrant foods grown in the summer provide for us on the inside. And summertime foods also help with cellular repair to help us recirculate and make sure our cells are turning over and giving us new young cells to keep us as healthy as possible. So Apache people had access to plentiful foods like I mentioned above, and we'll go through some of these by season. So in the fall, which we're now headed into in the next few weeks, you'll start seeing pumpkins coming out, apples, walnuts. And something interesting about walnuts, our walnuts that grow on our reservation are really, really nutrient dense in comparison to anything you can buy at the store. So when you buy walnuts at the store, you do get health benefits from them, but the walnuts that grow on our reservation actually provide a higher nutrient content than anything you can find in any store. My family would go pick walnuts every fall, and you can use the husks for dye. And actually the hulls of those walnuts, there's certain foods that those hulls would get broken into or ground up into, and those do kill parasites. That was one food that actually contributed to killing parasites. Pumpkin seeds is another one. So when you get your pumpkins and you take out the pumpkin seeds and you're eating those seeds, it's contributing to killing off any parasites that may be found in the intestine. And there was other medicines that they used too, but food definitely could help. We're harvesting corn, gooseberries. Those are going to be growing on the side of the mountains up higher, like around Sunrise area. Same with currant berries. Pinon seeds, people are picking those up, and acorns right now. And in the fall, garlic and onion tend to grow earlier in the year, but they oftentimes end up hanging to dry, and then we start using them more in the fall and the winter because they have a heating effect or a warming effect on our bodies, which we like during the winter time. And garlic and onion go really well together. They have some very strong antiviral properties, so they do help our bodies defend against viruses and bacteria. And they go well with meats, pastas, soups. I mean, they're a really good option of something to be adding to your food, and you experiment a little bit until you get familiar with the flavors that they offer you. You'll get better at cooking with them as you use them. Squash, Jerusalem artichokes, these grow all over. You'll see them on the side of the road. They're a yellow flower. They have a really nice, delicious root. Beans, and then wild game, we tend to get those in the fall because they are plumped up and ready for the winter. So their meat is at its best. Organ meats traditionally were usually given, at least in my family, to the elderlies. They get first choice in our family of who's going to get the organ meat. So the liver, the heart, the kidneys, the intestines, we always offer that to the elders in our family first. They get first pick. And they're often shared by the elderlies to our younger family members, because the organ meats tend to be the best foods to provide a high concentration of vitamins and minerals before winter time comes, or during times of the year when we see more viral infections like flu, colds, and things like that. Those foods are really, really rich in those nutrients. And if you don't know how to use organ meats, this would be a great opportunity for you to be asking your family members how to utilize those and get familiar with eating them, because they're really, really good at strengthening your system, especially in fall and winter. Acorn, lots of people are out picking or have been out picking. This is just a picture of some Apache ladies before harvesting corn, drying it, and being able to process it and utilize it during the winter and then throughout the year when needed. And you see pumpkins there, some wild tea. So foods that they've been collecting through late summer and early fall. Winter foods, we ate things that were growing during the winter, but we also stored and dried some of our foods. So oranges and lemons, we could trade with people that had those access to those in lower elevations. Leeks, cabbage, winter squash, apples, turnips. Indian lettuce and miner's lettuce grows pretty much throughout the year, but it's one of those plants that grows along the river and has a tendency to tolerate cold better than some of the other greens. And that lettuce is really, really delicious. It's one that you can throw in salads and things like that, and chock full of nutrients that really help keep our energy levels up. Wild parsnips, potatoes, carrots, sweet potatoes. In the wintertime and fall, actually, you can gather cattail roots, and you can either make a flour out of them, or you can cook them just like you would a potato, and they're really delicious. You just have to make sure the water is clean where you get them. This is a picture of wild parsnips dug out of the ground. In the spring, there's certain foods that are helping our bodies to wake up again from the winter. So wintertime, our system sort of slows down and conserves its energy. And in the spring, we start to build our energy levels back up. So agave hearts, you can get those year round, but the spring is a good time to get those. Dandelions that grow in your yard, if they haven't been sprayed by chemicals, are really, really great for the liver. They go well in salads. They're kind of a bitter. Many of these foods have sort of a bitter taste. Washkun, wild onions, peas, wild asparagus. You can find that in areas next to river, and they're hard to see usually, but wow, when you find them, they taste so good. You can eat them raw, you can cook them. Unless they've grown too old, then they don't really have, you can't really eat them. They're too fibrous, but when you get them at the right time, they're so delicious. Wolfberries, those grow down in the lower elevations. They taste like little tiny tomatoes. They're really full of nutrients. Cattail cobs is kind of like a corn on the cob from the cattail when it's starting to grow again. And the cattail stalk, you can eat those when they're just newly growing as well. Nettles is a really great herb for building your blood back up from the winter, getting your circulation going. And it's a plant that we use as medicine for allergies. So for people that have a hard time with dust and pollen, they'll keep those plants to help them through the dry season. Fiddleheads, you have to pick those when they're really young. Indian lettuce, again, miner's lettuce, wild spinach, agave, and yucca stalk. You can harvest those and roast them. This is a picture of a lady using a handmade shovel to get the agave heart out from underneath the ground, underneath the spikes. And this is after they've roasted it. Summertime, these foods are going to be loaded with antioxidants, which help to protect your skin and your eyes, and they have anti-aging effects. So we drink a lot of these too. Mesquite beans, we can make flour and juice or tea out of it, wild tea, tungoja, Apache cabbage, juniper berries. All of these foods are plentiful and found in different areas of our reservation. Wild mint, sheep sorrel, you're going to find that up more towards like Sunrise in the meadows. And then lower down, prickly pears, watermelons, peaches, pomegranates. Purslane is considered a weed, and you find it in people's yards or on sidewalks. It grows all over the place around White River, and that one goes really good. You can fry it up or throw it in soups or eat it in a salad. Wild grapes by the river, strawberries, blackberries. Our foods promote optimum Apache health. So gathering, processing, and eating our Apache foods really makes us feel rewarded for our efforts in collecting them and processing them, and for our time, and it gives us an opportunity to bond and be closer with our families. Our own wild foods rejuvenate us and give us a sense of physical health, and they really give us a sense of blessing. We feel fortunate when we get to consume or eat the things that we come from and that come from us. So when we get to have our acorn stew and our Apache Kool-Aid and our cabbages and those kinds of things, we really feel blessed to have been able to consume or eat those foods. Our bodies have a genetic memory to those foods. Our bodies also have a genetic memory for water and places, and we have certain things that help us to thrive and really make us feel at our best. Our foods also unite our families, encourage our own Apache knowledge, strengthen our relationships, and it just builds up our identity of who we are as Apache people when we're eating our own traditional foods that are really from us, not from war times or times when we were struggling. And it enhances our gratitude and just feeling of being a part of things. This is a picture of tungoja, This is nos, the manzanita berries, mesquite berries, the Apache cabbage. The stalks of those are the sugar cane, and then our cactus fruit. So who do we turn to? Really look at the generosity of your food, because our food teaches us lessons every time we eat it, and it's communicating with our body on a really deep, vast level. And you're surrounded by it. It's all around you in our land, on our reservation and outside of our reservation. Talk to your grandparents, really talk to your family about food. Ask them, what did we used to eat long time ago? And just see what stories they share with you. Native Seed Search is a good place if you're wanting to grow your own garden. But growing plants that actually were grown by Native people. They have a whole seed bank set aside of traditional Native foods from the Southwest, and they do give free seeds. They have a certain amount, I think it's like 10 packets of seeds or something like that, that they give to any Native Americans that come wanting to grow a garden using heirloom seeds, which is what those are called. So teach your family, get outside, tell stories about your history, about your land, share with your children who you are and who you come from, and learn and teach the responsibility of harvesting so that we do not abuse our traditional foods to a point where they become extinct. So Native Seed Search, that's what their logo looks like. They're based out of Tucson, but they will mail you your seeds if you contact them. And the farm is wonderful at growing foods down in Canyon Day, and they will also teach you how to grow your own garden and start your own garden. So some references here for you. The things that I've incorporated into my presentation today, most of it I learned from my family and my loved ones. My grandma, Gladys Lavender, was a major contributor. My mom, Jackie Ethelbah, was a major contributor to the things I know. Many of my aunts and uncles, my dad, Jerry Ethelbah, many of our community members have just over time filled in and taught me more and more about our land and our people and our food history, our own history. And then my education at NAU and SCNM. I provided a few links if you're wanting to learn more about epigenetics, about native seeds and seasonal food guides and those kinds of things. So my name is Dr. Jina Ethelbah. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and if you have any questions about information I shared with you today, you can email me at jmethelbah@yahoo.com. And it's been an honor for me to be able to share this really important information with you about how your food can strengthen you and bring out the best in you, especially if that food is food that feeds your Apache genes and that nourishes you on a very deep level. So thank you very much for your time.